Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. Birthdays. Who needs them, right? Especially when your birthday present is a car crash starring you, your husband, and his first love. Oh, and did I mention she's pregnant? Because of course she is. So there I was, pinned in the wreckage, blood everywhere, looking like something out of a horror movie. And there was Kenji, my doctor husband, Mr. Always calm and collected, completely losing his cool. Not because of me, of course. No. Because she was freaking out. She's pregnant. He yelled like I was an idiot. 2 lives. Can't you understand the situation? Yeah, Kenji, I get it. She's carrying a kid and I'm just me, the wife, the one you vowed to love and cherish in sickness and in health, blah blah blah. Except apparently when there's a car wreck and your ex is about to give birth in the back seat. Later, I found out some bystander had filmed the whole thing. Kenji, the hero, saving the damsel in distress. The video went viral, everyone praising his bravery. His friends thought it was hilarious, waving the video in my face, those smug smiles plastered on their faces. Fumo, you're not going to be petty about this, are you? Petty? Me? Please. I was fresh out of surgery, clutching a miscarriage notice in my hand. No, I said, a smile I didn't feel plastered on my face. I won't. After all this marriage, along with Tanaka, Kenji is something I don't intend to keep. Let her have him, and I meant it. The second that damn anesthesia wore off, it was like a tidal wave of pain. I was a pale, trembling mess in that hospital bed, my chest screaming like I'd been stabbed. And there on my phone, that video just kept looping. Kenji, my knight in shining scrubs, rescuing his precious Rico from the wreckage, their eyes locked, fireworks practically exploding in the background. The comments, don't even get me started. A hero saving a beauty. True love. They're perfect for each other. If only they knew the hero was my husband and the unconscious lump in the car was me. I would have loved to offer my blessings, really, but somehow I didn't think that's what they had in mind. I scrubbed at the video, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. Happy birthday to me. Kenji had promised to celebrate with me, but then Rico whined about a tummy ache and he was off, scooping her up like she was made of glass. He was so eager to get to the hospital that he, caused the accident. Rico just a little shaken, me pinned in the back seat, blood gushing from who knows where, pain so bad I passed out. When I finally managed to call for help, his response was, Rico's pregnant. 2 lives. Fumo, be sensible. Sensible? I was covered in blood, Kenji. It was like he'd taken a sledgehammer to my head. I watched him run to Rico, his voice a soothing balm. Don't panic. I'm here. He was so scared she'd get hurt. I, on the other hand, was surrounded by the stench of gasoline and fading fast. But hey, I survived. At what cost, though? I stroked my aching stomach, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. That stupid video. What was the point anymore? The pain woke me up in the middle of the night. I went to find a nurse and there was Kenji, still in his white coat, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Were you with Rico? I asked, my voice flat. He gave me that blank look. Fumo, I don't have time for your nonsense. So calm, so steady, not a hint of guilt. But he couldn't hide the scent of gardenias, Rico's favorite perfume. How close had they been for it to cling to him like that? Something inside me snapped. Let's get a divorce, I said. What are you making a fuss about now? He sighed, his face a mask of impatience. Just because I didn't celebrate your birthday. I didn't answer. He just assumed a sneer, twisting his lips. Rico's having a hard time with the pregnancy. What's wrong with me taking care of her? You're just being petty and dramatic. His phone rang, cutting him off. His face softened instantly. Rico, of course. He never bothered to hide his tenderness with her. Busy, he said, hanging up. I'll make up for your birthday later. And he was gone. That was Kenji. Always making promises he couldn't keep. He didn't even notice my hospital gown, didn't ask if I was okay. I had almost died and he didn't care. Rico. I used to be trapped in this self-deception, pretending our marriage was something it wasn't. But now I was just tired. I wiped the tears from my face, surprised to find they were cold. And for the first time I didn't feel sad, not even a little. It's funny, isn't it? If I told people it was Kenji who chased me, they'd never believe it. We met on a blind date, found out we had similar hobbies, and then surprise, our parents were old friends. It was practically destiny, or so I thought. I knew about his first love, Rico. 7 years they were together, but we were adults, right? He'd have it all figured out. Oh, the naive. The moment Rico waltzed back into the picture, pregnant, my life went sideways. Kenji, Mr. Calm and Steady, became a nervous wreck. He was off with Rico stargazing on our anniversary. He was fixing her plumbing, leaving me alone in a restaurant. And if I dared to complain, I was just jealous. His wife, his second choice, always. But that was over now. As I was logging out of Line app, I saw a message from the research director. She was pushing me again to go abroad for further study. She'd mentioned it 6 months ago, but I'd said no. 2 years was a long time, and I couldn't bear to leave Kenji. All I'd wanted was a simple, stable life with him, but that was apparently too much to ask. I took a deep breath and called her. Director Makoto, I said. Is that overseas training still available? Fumo, she exclaimed, her voice full of surprise. You finally figured it out. Of course it is. I kept the spot open for you. Less than a month left, though. Can you be ready? I promptly booked an appointment for divorce application. Don't worry, I said, a smile in my voice. Everything will be on time. This time I was getting that divorce. Soon I packed my stuff and grabbed a cab home. By the time I got there, I was beyond exhausted. I practically crawled into the guest room and passed out. Then the knocking started. Fumo, Kenji's voice, and it sounded annoyed. I dragged myself out of bed and opened the door. There he was, glaring at me like I'd personally offended him. Why didn't you call me when you were discharged? He demanded. I blinked. No need to bother you with something so trivial. Trivial, he sputtered. A car accident is trivial? Fumo, did you deliberately hurt yourself to spite me? How could you be so reckless? Now the old me would have launched into a full-blown argument, but the new me just smiled. You're overthinking it, I said calmly. The doctor said I'm fine. Thanks for your concern. He looked stunned. Before he could say anything, a voice chirped from behind him. Fumo, you're home. Why didn't you tell me? Rico, in a slinky nightgown, looked perfectly at home. I glanced at Kenji. He rubbed his nose, avoiding my gaze. Rico's house had a leak, he mumbled. And since she's pregnant women need special care. I finished, nodding understandingly. I get it. He stared at me, speechless. I smiled sweetly. Helping friends is normal. Especially when they're in need, and you're a doctor. It's what you do. Rico's face tightened, and Kenji looked like he'd seen a ghost. I waited, but he just stood there. I turned to go back to bed. No, Fumo, he said, grabbing my hand. I know you're angry. I looked at him, surprised. You didn't react like this before, he mumbled. Aha, the past. Whenever Rico called, he'd run. We'd fought about it endlessly. I'd cried, screamed, even scratched his face. He hadn't cared, he just called me crazy, said I had a dirty mind. But now, looking at them, I felt nothing. I didn't love him anymore. I didn't care. I pulled my hand away. It's late, I said. Don't overthink it. It had happened so many times before, but this time it didn't hurt, not at all. I went downstairs, made a snack, ate way too much and still couldn't sleep. Scrolling through my phone, I saw Rico's post at the hospital, leaning on Kenji, his hand on her belly. My Kenji, the caption read, will be the best dad in the world. The comments were full of congratulations. Some even tagged me, trying to get a rise out of me. I looked down at my flat stomach, a bitter smile twisting my lips. I tapped the screen and replied, congratulations on getting what you wished for. The days crawled by, each one a little less painful than the last. Kenji didn't come home, and I reveled in the peace. I focused on healing, contacted a lawyer, and got the divorce papers drafted. Before I knew it, it was time for my follow-up appointment. And guess who I ran into? Kenji. His face turned to stone the second he saw me. That post on Rico's Line app was a joke, he said, his voice cold. You provoked her, and pregnant women are sensitive. If something happens to her and the baby, can you take responsibility? If something happens to her and the baby, the memories were like a punch to the gut. The memories I'd been trying to bury came flooding back. The accident, the blood, the darkness, the doctor's pitying look, the form I'd signed for the induced labor. I froze, my heart shattering into a million pieces. Kenji, seeing my silence, assumed I was guilty. He grabbed my hand, his grip tight. "You're going to apologize to Riko today," he hissed, "and get her forgiveness." I was still weak from the miscarriage, but he dragged me to Riko's room. It was packed and every face turned to sneer at me. Riko's friends, the same ones from the comments section. Riko, lounging on the bed, announced she wanted mangoes. Kenji, who normally hated fruit and was obsessive about his hands, started peeling them for her. I remembered asking him to make me brown sugar water when I had my period, and he'd flat out refused. "I'm a doctor, Fumo," he said. "My hands are precious. Order takeout." But there he was, mango juice dripping down his fingers, catering to Riko's every whim. It was a level of care I'd never received. The mocking stares intensified, but I didn't care. We were getting a divorce. None of this mattered anymore. Riko, as if just realizing I was there, gave Kenji a playful nudge. "You're so good to me," she said. "Fumo must be dying of jealousy." Kenji looked at me, a sneer twisting his lips. "Can't you do things yourself without me reminding you?" He tossed me a mango. I caught it and placed it on the table. He looked surprised. I knew why he'd given me an out, and I hadn't taken it. Someone scoffed. "Oh, she's gotten smarter. Knows how to play the game now." Kenji's expression softened. He kept peeling mangoes, but his eyes kept flicking to me, waiting for me to crack. But I just stared out the window, indifferent. His face darkened. Riko, eyes glistening, said, "Fumo, if you mind, you can have all these mangoes." The little martyr trying to make me look like the villain. She wanted to provoke me, get Kenji to yell at me, but I wasn't playing anymore. I smiled, stood up, and turned to leave. Kenji blocked my way. "Fumo," he said, his brow furrowed. "Why aren't you angry? What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "I'm taking such good care of Riko," he said, his voice tight. "Doesn't it bother you?" "Friends," I said politely. "It's reasonable to care for each other." "No, it's not," he insisted, his eyes red. "Why are you ignoring me? Not getting jealous? You weren't like this before." Riko's face fell. "Kenji, what are you talking about?" "Shut up," he snapped. Everyone stared at him, mouths agape. Even I was surprised. This was the kind of anxiety I used to feel. The commotion attracted the attention of the war doctor. He looked familiar, the one who treated me after the accident. "Miss Gu," he said, his voice full of concern. "How are you feeling? Any more vaginal bleeding?" I didn't get a chance to answer. "Vaginal bleeding?" Riko shrieked. "Fumo, do you have some kind of disease?" "Oh, should I not have asked?" She looked so innocent, so surprised, but her eyes were full of malice. Outside the room, people stopped to stare, their faces a mixture of mockery and disgust. But then the doctor spoke. "Vaginal bleeding in women, excluding pathological issues, is a normal physiological phenomenon," he said, his voice sharp. "If you don't understand, just shut up and stop misleading people." He turned to Kenji, his face a mask of disapproval. "Tanaka-sensei, your wife just had a miscarriage from a car accident. She's weak. How can you lose your temper at her like this?" The ward doctor didn't stick around long. A few scolding words and he was out the door. But even after he left, the room stayed silent. Everyone kept looking at Kenji and me, but no one dared to speak. Finally, Kenji broke the silence. "You were pregnant," he stammered. "And had a miscarriage? Fumo, why didn't you tell me?" "No need," I said, shrugging. "I could handle it myself." He looked shocked and angry, but I didn't care. The baby was gone. What was the point of talking about it? "Fumo," he said, his voice hoarse. "That was my child too. How can you say it was unnecessary?" I met his gaze, a sneer twisting my lips. Crocodile tears. "Kenji, I hadn't planned on mentioning the baby. Our marriage was over, and a child wouldn't have changed that. I didn't want to drag the baby into our mess. But Kenji, he brought this on himself. I didn't mind twisting the knife a little, letting him feel a fraction of the pain I'd felt. "You were there, Kenji," I said, my voice low. "I was bleeding, covered in glass, begging you to save me. And what did you do?" His eyes widened and I smiled. "Oh right, you saved Riko and scathed, just a little scared. You made your choice, Kenji. Don't blame me." I paused. Besides, Rico's pregnant. As long as you're willing, having more people call you dad isn't a loss, right? He was speechless, his body trembling, his fists clenched. Then Rico spoke. Fumo, she said, her voice soft. I didn't know. As a mother myself, I know how painful it is to lose a child. You must be very sad about your miscarriage. She stroked her belly, a sympathetic expression on her face, but her eyes held a smug smile. As compensation, she continued, why don't you become the godmother of my baby? Kenji cares so much about this child. If you treat this child as your own, it might ease your pain. The audacity of this woman. I'd always known she was shameless, but this was a new low. A surge of anger, hot and fierce, coursed through me. I walked over to her bed, raised my hand and slapped her hard. She stumbled back, clutching her face in shock. I used to ignore you, I said, my voice cold, because a fly won't land on an egg without cracks. But Kenji couldn't control himself. I'm not one to teach wives or deal with mistresses. Your provocations are childish, but you should never have mentioned my child. Do it again, and it won't just be a slap. I smirked, picked up the plate of mangoes and walked over to Kenji. I tilted the plate, the fruit tumbling onto his pristine white coat. Do you know why I didn't take the mango? I asked, wiping from my eyes. I looked at him, my voice clear and steady. Because I'm allergic to it. I had a reaction in front of you on our first date. If you can't even remember what your wife eats, don't pretend to care. His face paled and I laughed, a genuine laugh this time. Stop being so hypocritical, Tanaka-sensei. I raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing on my lips. Why should I asked, taking a leisurely sip of my milk. You told me to wait 5 minutes, it's been 15. Time's up. Kenji's face paled. Fumo, he pleaded. Just a little more time. I'll explain everything. Just wait for me. I stared at him, my expression unreadable. Why should I repeated, my voice like ice. You've made it abundantly clear where your priorities lie. I'm done waiting for you. Kenji. He looked like I'd slapped him. Fumo, he whispered, his voice hoarse. Please just give me one more chance. I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. One more chance? You've had countless chances, Kenji, and you've wasted them all. I'm done. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me, I said, my voice cold. We're getting a divorce, remember? You're not my husband anymore. He looked like I'd stabbed him. Fumo, he choked. Don't do this. I need you. I tilted my head, a cruel smile twisting my lips. Need me for what? To be your backup plan? Your second choice? No, thank you. I'm worth more than that. He looked like he was about to say something, but I cut him off. Just go, Kenji. Go back to Rico. She needs you more than I do. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away. I watched him go, feeling nothing but a cold satisfaction. He'd made his choice and now it was my turn. Why didn't I wait for him? I repeated, flipping through the divorce papers without looking up. I did wait. He was late and broke his promise, but it was just a little more time. You went to see Rico, didn't you? I cut him off, my voice flat. Don't bother denying it. There's lipstick on your collar. It was glaringly obvious. A bright red smear, Rico's handiwork, no doubt. She was setting the stage, and I wasn't about to disappoint her. Rico fainted. Kenji stammered, panic in his eyes. I was worried something might happen to her. There's really nothing between us. You misunderstood. His voice was hoarse, almost pleading, as if I was the one causing him pain. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. You feel wronged over something so small? I asked, my voice shaking with rage. Kenji, the pain I've endured because of you goes far beyond this. I couldn't hold it back anymore. When we got married, I said, my voice thick with emotion, you promised to make me happy, but all you've brought me is suffering and humiliation. The memories came flooding back, each one a fresh wound. 2 months ago, during a heavy rain, you left me stranded on the roadside because Rico called. I walked for 2 hours, got a bacterial infection, and ended up in the hospital. A month ago, during a business trip, I got caught in a riot. I was terrified. I flew 14 hours to get to you, seeking comfort. Rico singing her a birthday song a week ago. I was bleeding, begging you to save me and our baby, And you took Rico and got on the ambulance without looking back. If it weren't for the firefighter, I would have died in that car. I clenched my fists, tears streaming down my face. Tell me, Kenji. I shouted. What right do you have to complain to me? He stood frozen, his lips trembling, unable to speak. I took a deep breath, ready to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. Fumo, he choked out. I was wrong. I'm a bastard. You can hit me, scold me, but please don't divorce me. I didn't know you were pregnant. I thought it was a minor injury. We can have more children. I'll take care of you. Give me a chance. I slapped him, all my hatred and pain channeled into that one blow. You're a real scumbag, Kenji. I laughed, tears blurring my vision. Even now, you haven't looked at my medical records. If you had, you'd know I was hemorrhaging. I almost died on the operating table. They had to replace all my blood and remove my uterus, and now you tell me we can have more children. With each word, his face grew paler, his expression more frantic. By the end, he looked utterly devastated. I scoffed. If you truly feel guilty, I said, my voice cold, remember to sign the divorce papers quickly and give me more money in the settlement. And with that, I left him standing there, his world crumbling around him. I went upstairs to rest, finally free. Kenji, bless his heart, was like a dog with a bone. No matter how many times I told him to sign the damn divorce papers, he refused. He started bringing me all my meals, showering me with roses, following me everywhere. It was suffocating. Kenji, I said, my voice tight with annoyance. Do you think this is helping? You're disturbing my life. Are doctors this free these days? He winced. I've been suspended, he mumbled. Apparently, someone had filed an anonymous complaint, accusing him of inappropriate relationships with patients. His favoritism towards Rico hadn't helped either. Now he was facing suspension and investigation, years of hard work down the drain. But I didn't care. He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. Now I just want to make it up to you. Sure, I said, cutting him off. I'll give you a chance. His face lit up with hope, then crumbled the next second. Sign the divorce papers, I said, my voice cold. If you don't, I'll file for divorce after 2 years of separation. It's over, Kenji. I'd been blinded by love once, and it had nearly destroyed me. Now I was clear-headed. No one was going to stop me from moving on. Fumo, he pleaded, his eyes full of regret. I know I hurt you, but I truly realized my mistakes. Can't you give me a chance to make amends? I stared at him, my expression unreadable. Can you give me back my child, Kenji? After the miscarriage, I thought I was tough enough to handle it, but every night the sound of a baby crying echoed in my ears, nightmares, tears, the whole 9 yards. Logically, I knew it was for the best. The baby was a surprise. My relationship with Kenji was a dumpster fire, and bringing a kid into that mess wouldn't have been fair. Plus, it wasn't like I'd chosen to end the pregnancy. The accident had made the decision for me. But the sobbing was real, the sleepless nights were real, and the donations I made to temples, lighting lamps for the baby's soul, were real. No matter how much I tried to convince myself, I couldn't forgive myself. I felt like a failure, a mother who'd lost her child through carelessness. I hadn't even had a chance to feel joy before the pain of loss ripped me apart. I hated myself, and I hated Kenji even more. I kept imagining, what if I'd been rescued first? Would the baby have survived? Would it have been a boy full of life or a little girl who looked like me? I'd never know. That night, Kenji stayed in the living room. The next morning, the floor was littered with cigarette butts, and the divorce agreement was signed. I didn't hesitate. I went straight to the airport, ready for a future that was mine alone. Training and studying kept me busy. By the time I'd settled in, 6 months had flown by. I caught up with old friends, and that's when the gossip started. Fumo, they said, their eyes wide. You won't believe how miserable Rico is now after the divorce. I kept things quiet, feeling things faded back to being friends. I'd posted online, no need to be messy, but Rico couldn't help herself. She'd flaunted her relationship with Kenji, and someone had dug up the dirt. Turns out, not all our friends were clueless. People were angry, and they took my side. Rico and Kenji's reputations were in tatters. And then, just as Rico was about to give birth, the real father of the baby showed up. Some wealthy woman who accused Rico of being a mistress and had her beaten until she miscarried. Rico almost died, and even though the doctors saved her, the baby was gone. Permanent damage left her bedridden for life, and there was no justice. The wealthy woman had used people with mental health issues to do her dirty work. A few medical records and they were off the hook. Kenji got caught in the crossfire and was fired. No one knew where he ended up, probably some backwater clinic. His life was a mess, but none of it mattered to me anymore. I stretched, a smile playing on my lips, and went back to my studies. The past was the past. I had a future to build.